Whispering Lake, based on a true story. Part 1. The Call from the Water. They used to say the lake spoke to those who were willing to listen. Of course, nobody in Ashwood really believed it. Not out loud, not in daylight, but every town has a story it refuses to bury. And here it was Whispering Lake. Ashwood was the kind of town where people still left their doors unlocked, where the gas station also sold homemade pie, and where gossip spread faster than the morning fog. The lake sat at the far north edge of town, beyond the pine groves and the dirt road that hadn't been paved since the 1950s. It wasn't much to look at, just a stretch of black water surrounded by trees that leaned too close, as if they were listening to something the rest of the world couldn't hear. Emma Hale hadn't been back in 10 years, not since the night her mother disappeared. The bus rolled into Ashwood just past sunset, brakes sighing against the damp October air. It smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke. Emma stepped down with one bag slung over her shoulder, her boots crunching on gravel. The town looked smaller than she remembered, quieter, like something had folded itself inward while she was gone. A pickup rattled by on Main Street. The driver slowed just long enough to look at her, a long, curious look, like he was trying to place her face in a half-forgotten memory. She pulled her coat tighter around herself and kept walking. Ashwood hadn't changed much. The old diner with the flickering neon open sign, the hardware store, the gas station, a handful of two-story houses with peeling white paint and yellow porch lights. Only the shadows felt different, longer, heavier, like they had been waiting. When she reached her family's old house on the south end, the porch light didn't turn on. Of course it didn't. Nobody had lived here since her mother vanished. The real estate agent had left a key under the mat, but Emma didn't need it. She lifted the mat, found the cold brass key exactly where it always had been, and let herself in. The air smelled like dust and time. Her footsteps echoed across bare floors. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, curling like old paper on a flame. The house groaned faintly as it settled, the way houses do when no one has touched them for years. She'd sworn she would never come back. And yet, here she was, because some doors never really close. She flicked on a light. The bulb hummed and blinked, then cast a weak yellow glow across the hallway. The silence was thick, almost physical. And somewhere beneath the layers of quiet, she thought she heard it, soft, low, like a breath skimming the surface of the world. Shh. Emma froze. Her heart stuttered once, then began to pound. She held her breath, straining to listen. But there was nothing. Just the wind moving through the pines outside. She forced herself to exhale. "It's just the house," she muttered. "Old wood, old pipes." But deep down, something inside her stirred. A memory, or maybe a warning. The next morning, the fog was so thick, it felt like stepping into a dream that hadn't decided what shape to take yet. Emma zipped up her coat and walked toward the lake. She told herself it was just to see it, to get it out of her system. But the truth was simpler. Whispering Lake had a pull. It always had. She followed the dirt path she used to take as a child, past the rusted swing set, past the grove of pines that whispered even when the wind didn't blow. The ground was damp and soft, soaking into her boots. Somewhere ahead, a crow cawed once, and then fell silent. And then she saw it. Whispering Lake lay still. No ripples, no movement, just a sheet of black glass under a pale, sickly sky. The trees leaned in from all sides, their branches clawing at the mist. It hadn't changed. Not at all. Emma stepped closer until the wet soil sucked faintly at the soles of her boots. The air grew colder the nearer she got. Not like autumn cold, but something deeper, older. She felt it against her skin like invisible fingers tracing the edges of her face. Her mother's voice drifted through memory like smoke. "Never go near the water after dark, Emmy. Never." A breeze shivered across the surface of the lake. The mist parted slightly, and for a second she thought she saw something. A figure standing on the far side. Tall, still, watching. But when she blinked, it was gone. Emma's breath clouded in the cold air. "It's just fog," she whispered. "Just fog." But the lake didn't care what she believed. It listened, and sometimes it answered. That night, she met Leah again. Leah Miller still lived in Ashwood, and she hadn't changed much, still sharp-eyed, quick with a grin that didn't quite hide how restless she was. She met Emma at the diner, where the coffee was terrible, but the gossip was fresh. Leah wore a leather jacket over a faded band tee and had her reporter's notebook peeking out of her bag. "Well, well," Leah said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Emma Hale, back from the big city. You look like shit." Emma snorted softly. "Nice to see you too." Leah's grin softened. "I mean it, though. You okay? Jet lag. And this town still smells like wet pine needles." "Yeah," Leah said, looking out the window toward the tree line. "Some things don't change." They talked for an hour, catching up on small things that didn't matter. Leah told her about the job at the Ashwood Gazette. Emma talked about graduate school and anthropology, but the lake hung between every sentence. Eventually, Leah leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You've been to the lake, haven't you?" Emma stiffened. "Why would you?" "Because that look on your face." "I've seen it before." Leah's smile was gone now. "Everyone who goes back there gets that look." "What are you talking about?" Leah's fingers drummed against the tabletop. "People still hear it, Emma. At night, they say the lake whispers their name. My neighbor swears she saw someone standing on the water last month." Emma forced a laugh she didn't feel. "It's just stories. Like when we were kids." Leah didn't laugh back. "It's not a story." Later that night, Emma couldn't sleep. The wind had died completely. The house creaked like old bones, and through the window, beyond the pines, she could see the faint outline of the lake catching the moonlight. She told herself not to go, but something was pulling at her, slow and patient, like a hand closing around a string tied to her chest. She found herself walking down the dirt path barefoot, the cold biting at her skin. The trees stood still. No sound, no wind, not even insects. The lake looked different at night, bigger, hungrier. Its surface was so still it didn't reflect the moon. It swallowed it. She stepped closer. One more step, another. Then she heard it. The whisper, soft, low, slipping between the trees like smoke. "Emma." Her breath caught in her throat. It was her name. Someone or something was whispering her name. Emma. It was closer this time, not echoing, not carried on the breeze. It was coming from the lake itself. Her skin prickled all over. She stared at the water, wide-eyed, and then she saw the ripples, a perfect circle spreading outward from somewhere near the center. Something had disturbed the surface. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice cracking like thin ice. The lake answered with silence, and then another whisper. Not a voice she recognized, not quite human either, like breath exhaled through water. She took a step back, but her heel hit something solid. She turned. A figure stood behind her, tall, motionless, its face swallowed by shadow. Her scream caught in her chest, and then, just like that, it was gone. No footprints, no sound, just the lake still whispering her name. She She stumbled back to the house, heart hammering, lungs burning. She locked the door, even though she knew locks wouldn't stop whatever that was. She stood there for a long time, forehead pressed to the wood, whispering to herself that it wasn't real, that she was just tired, that lakes don't whisper. But deep down, a part of her remembered. The night her mother vanished, the way the lake had whispered then, too. The next day, Emma went to the sheriff's station. James Turner was behind the desk. He had been a year ahead of her in high school. Back then, he'd been the kid who fixed cars and kept to himself. Now he wore the sheriff's uniform like it didn't quite fit him yet. "Emma Hale," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Didn't expect to see you again." "Yeah," she said. "Didn't plan on coming back." "What brings you here?" His voice was light, but his eyes were careful. She hesitated, then said, "Do people still talk about the lake?" His brows furrowed. "Whispering Lake?" "Yeah," he exhaled slowly. "Depends who you ask. Most just pretend it isn't there. Makes it easier." She glanced at the bulletin board behind him. A few missing person posters hung there. Not many, but one caught her eye, recent. Leah's handwriting was scrawled across the bottom. "Last seen near the lake." She swallowed hard. "People are still disappearing." James's jaw tightened. "We don't know that. Some just leave. Do you believe that?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said softly, "Your mom was the last one before all this started." The words hung in the air like fog over the water. That night, Emma returned to the lake again. This time, she brought a flashlight. She wasn't sure why. Maybe she just needed to prove to herself that what she heard wasn't real, that the whisper was just wind, that the figure she saw was her own shadow. But the closer she got, the colder it felt. The lake was waiting. She could feel it. The flashlight beam shook as she raised it. The mist rolled low across the water, thick and pale. And then she heard it again, clear, sharp, whispering her name. "Emma." Her breath hitched. She pointed the light at the lake. In the center, something moved. It wasn't a ripple this time, it was a shape. Something standing on the water. For one long heartbeat, she saw it clearly. A woman, pale, hair clinging wet to her face. Her lips were moving. "Emma, come closer." The light flickered. The shape was gone. Emma stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. Her pulse pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird. She ran. She didn't stop until the house came into view, her lungs burning, throat raw. From the porch, she turned back toward the lake one last time, and though she couldn't see it clearly through the trees, she swore the water was still whispering, and this time it wasn't just her name. It was something else, a promise or a threat. Part 2. The Drowning Light. The next morning, the mist still clung to Whispering Lake like damp fingers. The air was heavy with dew, and even the birds seemed reluctant to sing. Elena Moore, wrapped in her thick wool coat, followed the gravel path back toward the lake's edge, her boots crunching softly against the stones. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the sound again, the low, wet whisper she'd caught outside her cabin the night before. It hadn't been wind. Wind didn't shape words. The local sheriff had told her over the phone that the lake sometimes played tricks, that it was just fog echoing against the trees. But she'd grown up with this lake. She knew what fog sounded like. As she reached the small dock, the boards creaked under her weight. Her breath came out in quick, white clouds. She peered into the water, expecting to see her reflection. But it was just darkness, not dark water, black water. The sun was rising behind the trees, yet the lake remained a pool of ink, swallowing the light whole. She stared into it until she saw a shimmer, a faint glow somewhere beneath the surface. It pulsed gently, like a lantern being waved slowly back and forth. "Help me." Elena jerked back, her boot catching on the edge of the dock. She nearly fell, catching herself on the cold wood. Her pulse roared in her ears. She swore she'd heard it, soft, wet, like someone speaking through water. The glow blinked out. The lake fell silent again. "Jesus Christ," she whispered. A voice behind her made her jump. "You saw it too, didn't you?" She spun around. A man in his late 60s stood there, wearing a faded parka and holding a thermos. His face was creased like old leather, but his eyes were sharp, alert, almost too alert. Who are you?" Elena asked. "Name's Harold Finn. Been living around this lake longer than anyone still breathing. And don't bother pretending. I know that look. You saw the light." Elena didn't respond. "Most folks pretend they didn't," Harold went on, stepping closer to the dock. "Makes it easier to sleep at night." She finally found her voice. "What is it?" Harold chuckled, but it wasn't a friendly sound. "It's not a what. It's a who." The way he said it made her skin tighten. Harold leaned against a wooden post, eyes locked on the black surface. "Used to be, folks around here would say the lake belonged to her. A girl who went under and never came back up. When the light calls to you, it means she's hungry." "That's a story," Elena said, trying to sound skeptical, though her voice trembled slightly. "Stories don't whisper your name, do they?" Harold shot back. The morning air grew colder, a biting breeze brushing her cheeks. The mist thickened, curling around their legs like smoke. Elena's stomach knotted. She wanted to walk away. She should have walked away. But instead she asked, "What happened to her?" Harold's jaw clenched. "That depends who you ask. Some say she drowned herself. Some say someone pushed her. Some say she was dragged down by something older than this town itself. But they all agree on one thing," she whispers. Elena swallowed. "Whispers what?" He turned and stared at her, dead serious. "Your name. Always your name first." A sound drifted across the lake then, a faint, melodic hum. Not quite singing, not quite crying. It was somewhere in between. Harold stiffened. "We need to leave," he muttered. But Elena stepped forward. "That sound. I heard it last night, too." Harold grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Then you're already marked." She pulled away. "That's ridiculous." He leaned in, lowering his voice to a rasp. "Do you know how many people have said that to me? How many I've watched disappear into this goddamn lake? It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. The lake believes in you." Her pulse hammered. Her mind told her this was just a story, a creepy local legend. But her gut felt cold. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I've buried too many strangers." Harold started backing up the path, muttering under his breath like a prayer. Elena stared after him, then turned back to the water. The surface was still now. Quiet. Too quiet. She knelt at the edge, feeling drawn closer despite herself. Her reflection finally returned, but it wasn't quite right. The eyes staring back weren't hers. They were a shade too pale, the smile too thin. She gasped and fell backward. The reflection didn't vanish. It stayed, grinning up at her from beneath the water. Elena scrambled to her feet and ran back toward her cabin, heart hammering, the mist chasing her like fingers around her ankles. That night, she locked every door and window. She lit the fireplace and sat in the chair, clutching a flashlight like a weapon. The house popped and groaned with the cold. The whispering began again just after midnight. Elena. Her blood turned to ice. The voice wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the cabin. It seeped from the floorboards, from the pipes, from the goddamn walls. She clamped her hands over her ears, but it didn't help. The whisper wasn't sound. It was something deeper, something that curled around the edges of her mind. Come back to me. The flashlight flickered. The fire hissed like something had taken a deep breath. She forced herself up, heart slamming, and stumbled to the front door. But the moment her hand touched the knob, a knock came from the other side. 3 slow knocks. She froze. Harold, she whispered. No answer. 3 more knocks, louder this time. The whispering grew stronger. She felt it sliding beneath her skin, down her spine. She pressed her forehead to the door, trembling. Open the door, Elena. It was her own voice. When morning came, she found the footprints. They were wet, bare, leading from the lake straight to her front steps. Harold came by just after sunrise, pale and jittery. You heard her again, didn't you? Elena didn't answer. She pointed to the prints. He stared at them, lips tightening. She's close now. You need to leave. Tonight. Elena wanted to argue, to demand answers, but something about the way Harold's voice shook stopped her. She packed a bag by noon, but as the sun began to sink behind the trees, painting the lake in bruised shades of gray, she caught something moving in the fog, just at the edge of the water. A figure, standing, watching. She froze at the window, breath held, every muscle locking tight. It wasn't Harold. The figure tilted its head slowly. The fog curled tighter. The lake whispered, "You can't run from what's already inside you." Part 3. The Girl Beneath the Black Water. The storm rolled in without warning. By dusk, the wind howled through the forest like something alive, bending the pines and scattering the mist into shreds. The lake below Elena Moore's cabin looked different now. Restless. Its surface churned in slow, deliberate circles, though no rain had yet touched it. It wasn't the wind that moved the water. Elena stood at her window, bag half packed on the floor. She had planned to leave that night. She'd even mapped the road out of town. But something about the way the fog clung to the tree line made her hesitate, as though the world outside no longer belonged to her. And then she saw it again. The figure. This time it wasn't at the water's edge. It was standing on the dock, perfectly still. The last time she'd seen it, it had been shrouded in mist. Now the fog had peeled back just enough for her to glimpse its outline clearly. It was the shape of a young woman in a soaked white dress, hair hanging like weeds down to her chest. Her head tilted to one side in that same unnatural way, as if listening to something beneath the surface. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She stepped back from the window, but she couldn't tear her eyes away. The figure slowly lifted its arm and pointed at the cabin. The lights flickered. Elena. The whisper curled through the room like smoke, sinking into the walls, the floor, into her bones. She stumbled backward, clutching the edge of the table. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." The front door rattled, once, twice, 3 times. Elena grabbed the flashlight and the hunting knife she'd found in one of the kitchen drawers. She wasn't sure what she'd do with it. How does one fight water? But she needed something in her hands, something real. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. She crept closer, pulse pounding. Rain began tapping the roof like 1,000 fingers. The storm had arrived. "Harold," she called out, though her voice was already breaking. But deep down, she knew it wasn't Harold. A drip echoed from somewhere behind her. She turned sharply. Water seeped from the walls. Not a leak, something thicker, darker, sliding like a pulse down the wooden panels. The whispering grew louder, overlapping voices now. Dozens of them. She's waiting. She's lonely. She's cold. The lights died. The cabin was swallowed by darkness. Elena's breathing grew ragged. She flicked the flashlight on and swept the beam across the living room. For a moment, everything was still. Just the storm, the drip of black water, and the whispering that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. And then the footprints appeared. Wet, bare, emerging one by one from the door, trailing across the floor toward the bedroom hallway. She aimed the flashlight at the door. It was still locked. Someone, or something, was inside. Her hands trembled so badly the beam shook across the walls. "Who's there?" she hissed. No response, only whispers. She stepped backward toward the phone on the counter, her heart hammering so loud she swore the thing in the house could hear it. She grabbed the receiver. "Deadline. Come back to me." Her own voice again, this time from the hallway. The flashlight swung toward the sound. A wet handprint bloomed on the wall. Then another and another. They crawled toward her like something alive. She dropped the phone and ran for the door, fumbling at the lock. But when she yanked it open, cold mist slammed into her like a wave. The figure was no longer on the dock. It was standing at the bottom of her steps. The girl's head tilted up slowly. Her eyes caught the flashlight beam and reflected it like glass. Her mouth opened wider than any human mouth should. Water poured out in slow streams, dark and thick, pooling at her bare feet. Elena screamed and slammed the door shut, backing away, knife shaking in her hand. Then came a sound that wasn't a whisper. Knocking, not with hands, with nails, scratching up the door. The storm grew worse. Wind howled through the chimney, making the house groan like it was alive. Thunder rumbled low, almost like a growl. Elena ran to the back window, desperate to find another way out. But when she wiped the condensation from the glass, she froze. There was another figure out there, standing near the trees. This one was a boy, no older than 12. Clothes soaked, eyes hollow. He raised a hand in a stiff, broken wave. "Help me," he mouthed. Lightning flashed, and in that split second, dozens of shapes flickered into view. Men, women, children, all soaked, all staring at the cabin, all silent. When the thunder rolled, they were gone. "Elena?" She spun around, that voice, human, desperate. Harold burst through the back door, water dripping from his coat, eyes wild. "Jesus Christ, what the hell are you still doing here?" he shouted, slamming the door behind him. She stumbled toward him. "She's here!" "Harold, she's inside." He grabbed her by the shoulders. "Listen to me. She's not just a ghost. She's not some little drowned girl they tell stories about at bars. She's older. Older than the lake. Older than this whole goddamn town." The floorboards creaked beneath them. Slow. Heavy. Harold's eyes darted down. "We have to move. Now." They crept toward the door, but before they could reach it, the whispering surged again. It wasn't in English anymore. It was older, like the sound of water breathing. Harold froze. "Don't listen," he hissed. "No matter what you hear, don't answer her." The cabin lights flared once, then everything went silent. Even the storm paused. And then the girl was there, standing in the middle of the room, water dripping from her dress, forming a growing puddle at her bare feet. Her eyes locked on Elena with something that wasn't quite anger, but hunger. Harold raised the lantern he carried. Back! Get back! The girl tilted her head. The water on the floor rose, not splashed, rose. Tendrils of liquid crawled up the walls, curling around the furniture like veins. Elena stumbled back, choking on panic. What does she want? Harold's voice was low. She wants you to listen, and once you do, you belong to her. The girl opened her mouth. This time, the whisper wasn't gentle. It was deafening, a roar beneath the surface like thousands screaming underwater. Elena dropped the flashlight. Her knees buckled. She felt something cold brush her ankle. The water. It was wrapping around her leg, pulling. No! Harold grabbed her, yanking her back, but the water yanked harder. She screamed as the floor vanished beneath her feet and the room blurred. She was falling, not onto the floor, but through it. Elena crashed into icy darkness. She was underwater, but not in the lake. This was deeper, below the lake. The world above had folded into black silence. The light was a faint pulse somewhere far, far below. The whispers were all around her now, close, brushing against her skin like cold fingers. Shapes drifted through the blackness, faces pale and bloated, mouths open in silent screams. She kicked upward, but the surface wasn't there. There was no up, no down, only dark water. A hand grabbed her wrist, small, cold. She whipped around and saw the girl. Up close, she was almost beautiful. Almost. Her skin was pale as the moon, her lips a deep blue. Her hair floated like ink, and her eyes, those hollow, endless eyes, pulled at something deep inside Elena. "You heard me," the girl whispered. "Now you stay." Back in the cabin, Harold stood alone. The water was gone, the floor dry, the lantern flickered. "Elena," he called out. No answer. Outside, the storm raged on, but beneath it, the lake was whispering louder than ever. He knew what that meant. Another one was gone. He sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. "God forgive me," he muttered. And then, a knock at the door. Slow, deliberate. "Harold?" It was her voice. Part 4. The Drowned Choir. The lake was louder that night. Even with the windows bolted, the whispering found its way into every corner of the cabin, sliding between the walls, curling around the light fixtures, threading through the air like smoke. "Harold," her voice again, not just once, dozens of overlapping echoes, each one slightly off, like a chorus repeating a name it had learned by heart. Harold Finn sat at the kitchen table, lantern burning low. His hands were slick with lake water, though he hadn't been outside. He rubbed them hard against his jeans, but the chill didn't leave. It never left. She was gone. Elena was gone. And just like every other soul before her, the lake had swallowed her whole. He'd tried. God knows he'd tried to warn her, but no one ever really listened. The whispers didn't just call you, they chose you. The wind howled through the tree line, pressing against the cabin like invisible hands. Harold's eyes flicked to the door. 3 muddy footprints trailed from the threshold to the hallway. He'd mopped them up 5 times already, but they kept coming back. He poured himself a finger of bourbon with shaking hands. It burned going down, but not enough. Behind him, the old radio crackled. He hadn't touched that radio in years, not since before the first disappearance. Its speakers hissed with static, then snapped to life. "Help!" The voice was soft, a woman's, familiar, Ah, Harold, please. His heart clenched. He knew that voice. Elena. He turned toward the sound, the lantern flickering across the peeling wallpaper. The radio sat in the corner, its dial spinning slowly on its own. Elena, where are you? His voice cracked. Under... The dial spun faster. She's waiting. The temperature in the room dropped. Frost crept across the edges of the window. The whispers layered on top of each other, swelling, multiplying. He grabbed the lantern and the shotgun propped against the wall. Not this time, he muttered. You're not keeping her. But the lake didn't care what Harold wanted. The knocking began again. 3 knocks. Always 3. He moved to the door, slowly, the floor creaking under his boots. The lantern's flame danced wildly, casting long shadows that seemed to reach toward him. Say it, he whispered to the darkness. The wind died. Harold. The whisper came from inside the house this time. He spun around. The radio was silent. The hallway gaped open, its walls slick with condensation. A faint sloshing sound echoed from the bedroom. Drip, drip, drip. Water seeped under the door, black and thick like oil. It crept toward him across the floor, cold enough to sting when it brushed his boot. He raised the lantern. The door slowly opened on its own. She was standing there. Not Elena, the girl in the soaked white dress. Her skin shimmered under the lantern light, like the surface of water reflecting the moon. Her eyes were pools of black, swallowing the flame. She tilted her head. Water poured from her mouth in a steady stream. Behind her, shapes moved, dozens of them, men, women, children. The drowned. Their mouths opened and closed in unison, whispering, singing, a choir made of the dead. Come back to us. It's warm below. No more pain. Harold stepped back, shotgun raised. Where is she? Where's Elena? The girl blinked slowly, then her lips twitched upward, not into a smile, but into something worse. She's learning the song. The choir hummed, a low, wet sound that vibrated through the floorboards. The lantern sputtered. The shotgun suddenly felt useless in his hands. Harold turned and bolted out the back door. Rain slammed into his face like needles. The storm hadn't stopped since that night. It never stopped anymore. He ran down the muddy slope toward the lake, boots sinking into the earth with every step. Fog wrapped around him like a living thing. The dock stretched out into the black water. At its end, a single lantern burned. He hadn't left it there. Elena, he shouted. His voice disappeared into the mist. Something moved beneath the water. Not a ripple, a shape. It was massive, sliding just under the surface, circling the dock. The whispers swelled, twisting around him like hands gripping his throat. Join us, Harold. You already belong here. We've been waiting. Harold stumbled onto the dock, clutching the shotgun to his chest. Rainwater pooled around his boots, and the boards groaned under his weight. Halfway down, he saw her, Elena. She stood at the very end of the dock, facing the lake. Her dress clung to her like a second skin, soaked through, dripping black water. Her hair hung limp over her shoulders. Elena, he called again, voice breaking. She turned slowly. Her eyes were no longer her eyes. Harold, she whispered, and her voice was layered with many voices, as if the lake itself spoke through her. It's beautiful down there. Behind her, faces began to rise from the water. Not fully, just eyes, lips, pale skin half submerged. Dozens of them, watching. The choir was waiting. Harold took a single step closer. "I can pull you out," he said. His voice was shaking, but he forced the words out. "I can save you." She tilted her head. Her smile was small, sad. "You can't save what's already singing," she whispered. A hand shot up from the lake and grabbed his ankle. Another followed. Cold, strong, pulling. Harold fired the shotgun. The blast echoed across the water like a scream. The hand let go, but more rose in its place. Pale arms, dozens of them, breaking the surface. The fog closed in. Elena took a step backward into the water. "Come with me," she whispered. "Please." The dock buckled beneath Harold. The lantern at the end flickered out. Only the whispers remained, no longer soft, no longer gentle, a chorus of drowning voices. The water rose, not from the lake, from beneath the dock, from the air itself. It wrapped around his knees, his waist, his chest. Harold clawed at the boards, gasping. "Elena!" he screamed. For a heartbeat, she looked like herself again, eyes wide, terrified. "Harold," she whispered, "I can't stop it." And then the lake took her. The last thing he saw was her hand reaching toward him as the black water swallowed her whole. The dock was empty by dawn. The lake was still, calm. Only a single lantern floated on the surface, its flame stubbornly flickering against the pale gray sky. Down below, deep where the light couldn't reach, the choir was still singing. And among their hollow, drowned voices, a new one had joined. Part 5, Below the Surface. The water was colder than death. For a long time, Harold didn't feel himself sinking. He only felt the silence, the kind that swallows sound whole. His body drifted downward through the black, the last hint of moonlight fading above like a dying star. And then, the whispers began again. Soft at first, then louder, surrounding him. "You came back. We've been waiting. Don't fight." Dozens of voices wrapped around him, not like sound, but like hands. Each word pressed into his mind, seeping between his thoughts like water through cracked wood. He tried to scream, but the lake filled his mouth. Beneath him, something glowed. A faint, sickly light pulsed through the water like a heartbeat. The lake floor wasn't mud, it was moving. A pale shape twisted below. A structure, or something pretending to be one. He saw faces in the water, not just floating, twisting, merging, shifting together like wax melting into wax, a drowned choir. Their eyes were black hollows. Their mouths kept moving in perfect rhythm, forming the words of a song he couldn't understand. Harold thrashed, his lungs burned. He clawed at the weight pulling him down. "Stop fighting," Elena's voice whispered from somewhere near his ear. "It only hurts at first." His heart cracked open at the sound of her. "Elena." The word came out in bubbles, vanishing into the black. He spun. She was there, hovering in the water, hair flowing like seaweed, skin pale as moonlight. Her eyes were still hers, but dimmer, like something had been hollowed out inside. "Please," he mouthed. She reached for him, but her fingers didn't feel like fingers anymore. They were colder than the water, not flesh. Something else. Below them, the glowing shape took form. A chapel. It was upside down. A sunken church with its steeple stabbing downward into the darkness, its roofline covered in silt and weeds. Broken stained glass floated in the current like shards of frozen light. From inside, a dull red glow pulsed, slow, steady, alive. Elena turned to face it. Her head tilted slightly, the way it always did when she was listening to something far away. "They're calling me," she whispered. "They want me too." Harold said. She shook her head. They already have me. The lake floor shifted. A door at the base of the chapel opened, and a long, slow exhale rolled out. Bubbles spiraled upward like a sigh from the deep. One by one, figures began to emerge. The drowned, dozens of them, men, women, children. Their skin shimmered like wet porcelain. Their eyes were bottomless pits. They formed a circle around Harold and Elena, moving closer with every whisper. Their mouths opened in unison, no sound, just the movement. And then they sang. The lake vibrated with the sound, a low, guttural, impossible harmony that made the water itself shudder. It wasn't music, it wasn't human, it was the sound of something ancient and hungry. Harold's chest burned. He couldn't hold his breath any longer. Water rushed into his lungs. Instead of choking, he felt stillness. Cold fingers wrapped around his arms, his neck, his ribs. But they didn't drag him down. They held him. Elena's face hovered inches from his. "Do you hear it now?" she whispered. He did. It wasn't just noise anymore. He understood snatches of the words. They weren't calling him to die. They were calling him to belong. "No," Harold mouthed. "Yes," the choir answered. The church door yawned wider. Something moved inside, slow, trembling, massive. Two pale hands reached out of the doorway first, too long, too thin, jointed wrong. Then came the face. It wasn't human, but it wore pieces of human faces, eyes that didn't match, lips sewn together, skin stretched too tight. The whispers stopped. Everything went silent. And then that thing opened its mouth, not to speak, but to let the water itself breathe through it. "Welcome home, Harold Finn." It didn't say the words with a mouth. It spoke them inside his head. Elena moved closer to him, her hands against his chest, pressing him back toward the church. Her face was blank now. Whatever she'd been before, the lake had eaten it. Harold thrashed, trying to push away, but the choir's hands were everywhere now, wrapping around his ankles, his wrists, his throat. "Join us. Below is peace. Above is noise," he screamed. No one heard. They dragged him through the open door of the drowned chapel. The red glow flared bright, painting the black water crimson. Inside, pews floated upside down, nailed to nothing, crucifixes twisted like they were alive. And on the altar, a pulsing black mass throbbed like a heart the size of a man. It wasn't stone, it wasn't wood, it was alive. Elena knelt before it, hair floating like a veil. Her lips moved, whispering the same melody the choir sang. The hands forced Harold down beside her. His knees touched the floor of the chapel, cold, spongy breathing. The voice spoke again. "The lake remembers all. You are ours now." But Harold wasn't ready to disappear. Not yet. He clenched his fist and pulled the flare gun from the inside of his jacket. He'd forgotten he still had it, waterlogged but real. He pointed it straight at the pulsing mass. Elena's eyes widened. "Harold, don't!" The flare burst. The red flame exploded in the water, a blinding light in the dark. The choir shrieked, a sound that rattled through his skull. The mass pulsed violently, thrashing like a wounded beast. The hands loosened. He kicked free. For the first time since sinking, Harold rose. He grabbed Elena's arm, pulling her up with him. "Come on," he mouthed. For a heartbeat, she resisted. Then something flickered in her eyes, the Elena she used to be. She nodded. They swam upward. The choir screamed below, their bodies twisting, breaking apart like shadows burning in sunlight. The creature inside the chapel let out a sound like the lake itself, roaring. But the surface wasn't close. It never was. Harold's lungs screamed, his limbs burned, but he saw it. Faint silver light above. The surface. Almost there, he mouthed. Elena's hand slipped from his. He turned back. She wasn't behind him. She was sinking. Her hair floated around her like a dark halo, eyes wide, lips parted. The whispers wrapped around her again. Stay. He reached out, but the black tendrils coiled around her ankles, dragging her down. No, Harold screamed, bubbles spilling out of his mouth. He had a choice. Keep rising, or go back for her. The surface gleamed above like salvation. Her eyes pleaded below like memory. Harold dove back down. The thing was waiting for him. It rose from the chapel door, taller now, larger than before, its mouth splitting open to reveal rows of teeth like wet glass. Elena was in its grip, limp, her face pale but still alive. The whispers filled his head. They weren't asking anymore. They were commanding. This is where you end. This is where you stay. Harold looked at Elena. She mouthed something, just 2 words. Let me. And then she smiled. Not the lake's smile, hers. Before he could understand, she twisted in the creature's grasp and shoved him upward with everything she had. The hands didn't follow him this time. The last thing Harold saw as he broke free was the glow from below turning blood red and Elena's face vanishing into the choir. He exploded through the surface, gasping, coughing lake water into the night. The storm had passed. The forest was silent. The dock was empty. The lantern still burned. Harold dragged himself to shore, collapsing in the mud. Every muscle screamed. The lake behind him was perfectly still, like nothing had ever happened. But he heard it, the whispers. Not from the water this time, from inside his head. She's waiting. Come back. You belong here now. Harold pressed his palms to his ears, but it didn't help. The voice was under his skin, in his blood. He looked back at the lake. Fog rolled across the surface, and for just a second he saw her. Elena, standing on the dock, smiling softly. Then she was gone. The morning sun never touched Whispering Lake. It never would again. Harold sat on the shore, soaked to the bone, listening to the whispering that never stopped. And somewhere beneath the water, a choir sang a song he would never forget. He closed his eyes and whispered back,